Why was the name of the centigrade scale changed to Celsius?
The centigrade temperature scale was created by Swedish astronomer Anders Celsius, 1701 to 1744. In 1742, he was determined to create a new temperature scale as an international standard to be used by scientists. To do so, he wanted the degrees of 0 and 100 to be set under conditions easily reproduced in the laboratory. And those were the freezing and boiling points of water. Because the two extremes were divided into 100 degrees, he named it the centigrade scale. To honor his accomplishment, the Ninth General Conference on Weights and Measures officially changed the name to Celsius in 1948. Fortunately, since both words begin with the same letter, degree C did not have to be changed as well.
Are there other terms for describing clouds?
Yes, in addition to the major naming conventions for clouds based on altitude and characteristics. There are also a variety of other Latin terms used to describe clouds. These names can be appended to the main names of clouds. For example, a cumulus castellanus is a cumulus cloud, with formations on the top that look like castle towers. Below is a full list of other descriptors for clouds.
What is the most rainfall ever recorded within a one-day period?
Tropical storm Claudette brought a record U.S. rainfall of 43 inches in 24 hours in and around Alvin, Texas, in July of 1979.
How do you calculate how far away a lightning bolt is?
After you see a flash of lightning, count the number of seconds until you hear the thunder. Divide the number of seconds by 5. And the result is the number of miles away that the lightning occurred.
If neutrinos are so elusive, how do scientists observe them striking Earth?
It is possible to detect neutrinos from space by their very rare interactions with matter here on Earth, but not with conventional telescopes. The first effective neutrino detector was set up in 1967 deep underground in the Homestake gold mine near Leeds, South Dakota. There, the American scientists Ray Davis, Jr. 1914, and John Bockall, 1934 to 2005, set up a tank filled with 100,000 gallons of nearly pure perchlorate, used as dry cleaning fluid, and monitored the liquid for very rare neutrino interaction events. Other experiments have since used other substances, such as pure water, for neutrino detections.
What are the different types of satellites used today?
The two types of satellites used for weather observations are geostationary and polar orbiting. Geostationary satellites remain above a fixed point on the Earth's equator by traveling at a speed that matches that of the planet's spin. Polar orbiting satellites circle the Earth from pole to pole. These satellites orbit at a speed so that, 2 times a day, they are over the exact same spot on the planet in what is called a sun-synchronous orbit.
How much pressure does the atmosphere exert upon us?
Average air pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch, 1.03 kilograms per square centimeter, at sea level. Measured in inches of mercury, this comes to 29.92 inches, or 1013 millibars. To put it another way, a cubic yard of sea level air weighs a bit over 2 pounds. About 0.7 kilograms per cubic meter.
What is the Umkehr effect?
Swiss astronomer Paul Gotz published a paper in 1931 in which he described how ultraviolet light is affected by the ozone layer. Ozone absorbs different wavelengths of light in the ultraviolet range at varying amounts. And these amounts change depending on the angle of the sun in the sky. Umkehr is German for change or convert. Measuring the difference between the amount of light being received at the two wavelengths can tell scientists how much ozone is in the atmosphere.
What was the deadliest tornado ever in the world?
On April 26, 1989, a tornado landed about 40 miles, 65 kilometers, north of Dhaka, Bangladesh. When it was over, 1,300 people were dead, 15,000 were hurt, and about 100,000 lost their homes.
How was the jet stream discovered?
With the advent of airplanes that could cruise at elevations of over 30,000 feet. Over 9,000 meters high, pilots such as World War II bomber pilots flying over Japan and the Mediterranean Sea discovered the effects of the jet stream on their aircraft.
What are TSBs?
Total suspended particulates, TSBs, are particles in the air ranging in size from 10 microns on down to less than a micron in diameter. A micron is 1/millionth of a meter. People can breathe in many TSBs. Though larger particles can be weeded out by such things as nose hairs and mucous membranes. TSPs either result from primary sources, e.g., car exhaust, smokestacks, or are formed from secondary sources, such as ammonia and sulfur dioxide combining to form new pollutants, in this case, ammonium sulfate.
How do radars use the Doppler effect to measure the weather?
Doppler radar, unlike conventional radar systems that could only indicate where a storm was and how intense it was, can be used to detect wind speed and the direction storms are taking. Because one Doppler radar can only tell if a storm is heading away or toward it, a network of radars is needed to chart a storm's precise course.
Who are some of the unluckiest people when it comes to being struck by lightning?
Park Ranger Roy C. Sullivan, 1912 to 1983, survived being struck by lightning 7 times between 1942 and 1977. This Virginia Ranger was hit once in a car, once in a truck, once while fishing, once while camping, once in his own front yard, once in a ranger station, and once while on top of a lookout tower. Years after his death, he still holds the dubious honor of being the human lightning rod. In another peculiar case, a Midwestern family has had numerous members struck by lightning. One woman had been struck by lightning twice in 1965 and 1995. Her grandfather was killed by a 1921 lightning bolt, while her great-uncle was also killed in the 1920s. Her nephew was temporarily blinded when he was hit. And she also had a cousin who was less seriously injured while holding an umbrella in a storm.
Is carbon dioxide the most harmful global warming gas?
No. Actually, water vapor contributes much more to global warming than CO2 or methane do. The problem is that human activities often increase particulates in the air, which provides nuclei for precipitation to form in clouds.
What part of a hurricane is most damaging?
Floods caused by hurricane storm surges are the most destructive element. The low-pressure center of a hurricane causes a mound of water to rise above the surrounding water. This hill of water is pushed by the hurricane's fierce winds and low pressure onto the land, where it floods coastal communities, causing significant damage. Hurricanes sometimes spark tornadoes that contribute to the devastation.
What is a Siberian Express?
This term describes outbreaks of Arctic air that are severely cold. They descend from northern Canada and Alaska to other parts of the United States.
What is inversion?
When the air temperature rises with altitude rather than cooling, the condition is called an inversion.
How do sunspots affect weather?
While scientists still debate how important or significant sunspot activity is on our weather and climate, there are some theories. In the short term, solar flares and winds do not influence weather to any significant extent. Because the magnetosphere and upper atmosphere are more than capable of absorbing their energy. Over the long term, however, there could be consequences if the sun experienced a prolonged or permanent change in activity. Fluctuations in solar activity typically occur in the ultraviolet wavelengths. And UV radiation is known to affect the Earth's upper atmosphere. Astronomers and some meteorologists speculate that X-rays, too, resulting from sunspots and flares could, over time, change the amount of nitric oxide in the upper atmosphere, and this would have an effect on the ozone. Sunspot activity can result in more cosmic rays penetrating the atmosphere, which, in turn, spur on cloud formation and increase precipitation. More recently, there have been theories that significant decreases in solar activity predict oncoming ice ages on our planet. For example, during the Little Ice Age that lasted from the 15th through the 18th centuries, a period including the Maunder minimum, sunspot activity was at a low point. Other minimums, the Dalton minimum 1790 1820 and Sporer minimum 1420 to 1530, also coincide with colder weather.
Who created the first anti-air pollution law in Western history?
England's King Edward I proclaimed in 1306 c. that coal burning was to be restricted while Parliament was in session. The penalty for violating this law was rather harsh by today's standards, death.
What month is known for the most extreme changes in temperature?
July holds the honor for most extreme variations of temperature globally. Record extremes on the planet occurred when measuring the temperature in Libya versus the temperature at the South Pole. The difference between the two was 265 degrees Fahrenheit 129.4 degrees Celsius.
How many Category 5 hurricanes have there been since 1920?
The Saffir-Simpson scale was not invented until 1971, however. Reliable records on hurricane wind speeds and storm surges have been kept since the 1920s. According to such data, there have been 31 Category 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic since 1928. 8 of those have occurred since 2003, 4 in 2005 alone, which is one piece of evidence some climatologists point to when talking about global warming and its effects on tropical storm intensity. Of all those hurricanes, only 4 have actually made landfall on U.S. territory. Others have struck Central America or islands in the Caribbean, or they have weakened to Category 4 or below before reaching Puerto Rico or the Gulf Coast or Atlantic seaboard. Below is a chronological list of Category 5 hurricanes.
What is radar?
Radar is an acronym for radio detection and ranging, and it uses radio waves to detect objects in the atmosphere. It was first devised in 1904 by the German inventor Christian Hülsmeyer, 1881 to 1957, who called his radar detector a telemobiloscope and patented the device in 1906. The original purpose of his invention was for ships to be able to detect each other so that in poor weather conditions, e.g., heavy fog, they would not run into each other. Sadly, this brilliant invention did not catch on at the time. If it had, some speculate that the 1912 Titanic disaster could have been avoided. Another concept that Hülsmeyer came up with was the remote control. He believed, correctly, that radio waves could be used to turn mechanical devices on and off. Again, people ignored the concept and he never got the credit he deserved.
Is Chicago really the Windy City?
Chicago is not the windiest city in the United States. It actually got the nickname of the Windy City because of its reputation for being the home of blowhard politicians. Chicago's average wind speed of 10.4 miles, 16.7 kilometers per hour is exceeded by Boston 12.5 20.1, Honolulu 11.3 18.2, and Dallas and Kansas City, both 10.7 17.2.
What is Buys-Ballott's law?
Dutch meteorologist and chemist Christoph Hendrik Diederik Buys-Ballot, 1817 to 1890, was a pioneer in meteorology, especially when it came to explaining how air flows in large weather systems. The law that bears his name refers to the fact that when you stand with your back to the wind, the air pressure will be lower on your left than on your right in the northern hemisphere. And the opposite is true if you are standing in the southern hemisphere. This phenomenon, which actually only proves to be true during well-organized weather systems, was also discovered by American climatologist William Ferrell, 1817 to 1891. Ferrel actually formulated this theory a few months before Bayes' ballad. The Dutchman graciously acknowledged that the credit deserved to go to Ferrel. But the law had already been denoted Bayes' ballad's law, and the name stuck. Trade winds are very consistent winds blowing through the tropics, between 30 degrees south and 30 degrees north latitudes. At about 11 to 14 miles, 18 to 22 kilometers per hour, sometimes for days on end. In the northern hemisphere they blow toward the equator from the northeast. And south of the equator they blow in from the southeast. While the term trade winds leads most people to think they got their names from the days when large sailing ships depended on them for shipping routes. The word trade actually has a German origin and means track or path.
What is a heat burst?
In a manner similar to what happens when a Santa Ana wind rushes down into the low coastal areas of Southern California, a heat burst raises temperatures by compressing air. Usually associated with thunderstorms, heat bursts typically occur during the night when turbulent air from as high up as 20,000 feet is forced downward as a storm begins to break up and dissipate. Meteorologists theorize that this happens when virga rain that evaporates before reaching the ground, is present in dry, cold air. The resulting denser air is pulled down by gravity, increasing air compression near the ground rapidly and causing temperatures to rise unexpectedly. In Waco, Texas, on June 15, 1960, it was reported that a heat burst caused the temperature to soar to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius, for a brief period that was accompanied by winds of about 80 miles, 129 kilometers, per hour. More recently, in May of 1996, temperatures rose from about 88 degrees Fahrenheit 31 degrees Celsius to 101 degrees Fahrenheit 39 degrees Celsius. In the towns of Chickasha and Ninica in about 30 to 40 minutes. And on August 3, 2008, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, saw the temperature shoot up from about 72 degrees Fahrenheit 22 degrees Celsius to 101 degrees Fahrenheit 39 degrees Celsius during gusting winds of 50 to 60 miles, 80 to 100 kilometers, per hour. Perhaps most remarkable was a heat burst during the recent heat wave and fires in Australia. On January 29, 2009, at 3 a.m. a heat burst maxed out thermometers at 107 degrees Fahrenheit 41.7 degrees Celsius.
What is agricultural forecasting?
Agricultural forecasting concerns itself with predicting weather conditions, especially hail, that can be hazardous to crops, including precipitation, especially hail, extreme hot and cold, and damaging winds. Accurate forecasting in this area is a particular boon to farmers in that Meteorologists can help them decide when it is best to harvest or plant. When wind conditions are right to apply pesticides and herbicides, when to set up irrigation systems, or when to turn on wind machines and smudge pots before an oncoming freeze.
What is the greenhouse effect?
The greenhouse effect is a natural process of the atmosphere that traps some of the sun's heat near the Earth. The problem with the greenhouse effect, however, is that it has been unnaturally increased, causing more heat to be trapped and the temperature on the planet to rise. The gases that have caused the greenhouse effect were added to the atmosphere as a byproduct of human activities, such as combustion from automobiles.
What was the 2008 hurricane season like?
After a two-year lull in 2006 and 2007, 2008 came roaring back as one of the strongest hurricane seasons on record, although there were no Category 5 hurricanes. There were 2 Category 4s, Ike and Gustav, and 3 Category 3s, Bertha, Omar, and Paloma. Neither Ike nor Gustav made landfall in the United States as Category 5s. But a weakened Hurricane Gustav caused tremendous destruction in Galveston, Texas. About 1,000 deaths resulted from 8 hurricanes, 5 of which were classified as major, Category 3 or 4. There were also 8 strong tropical storms that did not develop into hurricanes. Despite lacking a Category 5 storm, the 2008 season broke the record for most months with a major hurricane, with 5 months including such major storms: July, Bertha, August, Gustav, September, Ike, October, Omar, and November, Paloma. Of these hurricanes, Gustav was the worst for Americans. Galveston had to be evacuated because of a huge storm surge and waves reaching an incredible 50 feet. 15 meters, many people lost their homes.
What was the Dust Bowl and what impact did it have on the United States?
The Dust Bowl drought and dust storms persisted, to varying degrees. From 1933 through 1939, devastating America's heartland. The worst drought years were in 1934 and 1939, and the worst dust storms occurred in 1935. The Dust Bowl turned once verdant farmlands into wastelands, and huge dust storms swept across Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and even eastern states. But dry, hot weather was not the only culprit. Farmers at the time used techniques that depleted the soil severely. Most did not rotate their crops or irrigate their lands the way we do so today. The result was that when severe drought hit, crops died, and the soil underneath was easily eroded. Strong winds blew the dirt into huge drifts, also sweeping away what little fertile soil was left. The impact of the Dust Bowl was not only loss of crops, but also a never-before-seen period of immigration. As former farmers abandoned their lands and, in many cases, headed out west to states such as California. Author John Steinbeck captured the plight of these people in his famous 1939 novel, The Grapes of Wrath. Photographers Dorothea Lange and Arthur Rothstein, among others, also recorded these terrible times for posterity in black and white photos while working for the Farm Security Administration. Today, the impact of the Dust Bowl can still be seen in America's central states. There remain many ghost towns that were once prosperous centers of commerce for local farm communities where the soil is still recovering.
What kinds of courses should I take at the university level?
For a more generalized career in meteorology, such as weather forecaster. A broad course in meteorology at the undergraduate level will prepare you well to continue on to graduate school. If you are particularly interested in detailed work in atmosphere science, you would be wise to earn an undergraduate degree in chemistry, physics, mathematics, or engineering. The growing field of environmental and climate research offers opportunities to meteorologists who also have an educational background in fields such as biology, ecology, oceanography, and geophysics. To increase your chances of finding a job at a professional level in meteorology, you will need at least a master's degree, and a doctorate is often preferred.
Can the relative humidity ever be higher than 100%?
No. It was once theorized that when clouds are in a state called supersaturation, it was possible to have a relative humidity of slightly over 100%, but this has since been proven false.
What is hypothermia?
Hypothermia is a life-threatening cooling of the body's temperature due to exposure to cold water, ice, or air. Chills and shivering can progress to much more serious symptoms, including disorientation, drowsiness, slurred or incoherent speech, memory loss, and unconsciousness. It only takes a decrease in core body temperature to about 94 degrees to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 34 degrees to 35 degrees Celsius, for the onset of hypothermia to occur, and external conditions don't even have to be particularly harsh. For example, a human body floating in 40 degrees Fahrenheit 4 degrees Celsius. Water can suffer from hypothermia in less than half an hour. Professional medical assistance is, of course, indicated for treatment of hypothermia, with the most important procedure involving stabilization of the body's temperature. An effective treatment is to have the patient inhale humid, Warmed air. 107 degrees to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, 43 degrees to 50 degrees Celsius, which warms the respiratory and nervous systems and helps restore brainstem function that, in turn, controls heart function.
Who discovered how rainbows form?
In 1304, a German Dominican monk named Theodoric von Freiburg, 1250 to 1310, showed that light passing through a large glass globe filled with water would create a rainbow because light waves were bent through refraction, reflection, and dispersion. He speculated that the same process occurs in raindrops, creating natural rainbows.
Where in the tropics are you safe from a hurricane?
Hurricanes do not strike within 5 degrees latitude on either side of the equator. Therefore, if you wish to live in the sunny tropics and have a healthy fear of hurricanes, you may want to investigate real estate deals near the equator.
Does dew fall?
While this is a common expression, dew does not actually fall. A point that was proven in a demonstration conducted by Scottish-American physicist William Charles Wells, 1757 to 1817. In 1814, Wells showed that dew actually formed on surfaces as water vapor condensed.
What is paleoclimatology?
Paleoclimatology is a fascinating discipline that combines paleontology with climate studies. Understanding what the Earth's climate was like millions of years ago can prove very valuable in understanding today's weather. In addition, it's just plain cool to find out facts such as that dinosaurs once roamed Antarctica. Tropical fruits used to grow in Oregon. And just 8,500 years ago the temperature in Greenland was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius warmer than it is today. Paleoclimatologists discover this information by examining animal and plant fossils, conducting ice core studies, and examining soils and rocks buried deep underground. Clues may be found in some of the most unlikely places. For instance, when ancient pine needles hoarded by rats 30,000 years ago were discovered. The composition of the plant matter was analyzed to learn what carbon dioxide levels were like back then.
Is there a difference between the Farmer's Almanac and the Old Farmer's Almanac?
The Old Farmer's Almanac was first published in 1792 under the editorial leadership of Robert B. Thomas, 1766 to 1846, and is currently published out of Dublin, New Hampshire. The similarly titled Farmer's Almanac debuted in 1818 in Ohio. The founding editor was David Young, d. 1852, and the publication is now headquartered in Lewiston, Maine. They are, indeed, different publications, although more confusion arises from the fact that initially, the Old Farmer's Almanac was called the Farmer's Almanac for a number of years. Both, though, are almanacs, which means they include information about upcoming astronomical events, such as tides, sunrises and sunsets, lunar cycles, and so on. For added interest, they include cooking recipes, gardening tips, nature news, and advice columns. Published annually, they also both make predictions about the weather for the coming year, which is what made them desirable books for farmers to own. Both books claim to have secret formulas for predicting the weather the most accurately, with the Old Farmer's Almanac claiming it has an accuracy of 80%. Meteorologists dispute such claims, though, and also note that the almanacs make broad generalities about weather forecasts that makes them hard to refute. For instance, a prediction for spring might say that the Midwest will experience more rain than usual.
Why is the sunniest place on Earth also the coldest?
Because of the Earth's tilt. Antarctica receives more rays from the sun than any other land mass on the planet. However, because the continent is covered in snow, the white stuff reflects much of that energy back into the atmosphere, 50 to 90% of it, in fact. Thus, Antarctica is extremely cold. This was not always the case, though. Millions of years ago, during the Jurassic period, Antarctica was much closer to the equator. Indeed, scientists are discovering dinosaur fossils there.
Has there ever been a hurricane in Great Britain?
Well, what really occurred in Great Britain was a very intense low-pressure system with hurricane-force winds. On January 25, 1990, a storm with winds up to 120 miles, 193 kilometers per hour hit Great Britain, killing 45 people and causing over $1 billion in damage. Even so, Brits often remember the Great Storm of 1987 even less fondly. Though it cannot be classified as a hurricane, hurricanes are tropical events only. It killed 18 people and was, at that time, the worst storm to hit the British Isles in the last 3 centuries.
How do thunderstorms make our planet habitable?
Thunderstorms, of course, usually bring rain or other precipitation with them, which is needed for life on Earth. but other rainstorms can do this as well. What makes thunderstorms particularly unique and important is their role in heat convection. Thunderstorms move warm air from lower elevations to upper elevations. The difference in temperatures between ground level and the top of thunderstorm clouds can be as much as 200 degrees Fahrenheit 95 degrees Celsius. Causing this air and temperature circulation helps cool our planet by as much as 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 9 to 10 degrees Celsius. Without thunderstorms, therefore, we would already be experiencing global warming. On a scale twice as bad as scientists are forecasting because of climate change.
Why is the sky blue?
While this might seem like a simple question to answer, it has puzzled parents of curious children for ages. The answer can be a bit long-winded. The Earth's atmosphere is made up of gases and a scattering of water and solid particles. As light from the sun enters the atmosphere, most of it passes straight through the air. But some of it disperses because of something called Rayleigh scattering. Shorter wavelengths of light waves in sunlight, those on the blue end of the scale, are absorbed by gas molecules and then released at different angles. Because the bluer wavelengths are scattered in this manner, this is the end of the spectrum of light that reaches people's eyes. However, as your eye looks more and more toward the horizon, you are looking through a much thicker layer of air and less blue light reaches your eyes. Which is why the sky appears bluer as you look up, but paler as you look toward the horizon.
How high up does the atmosphere reach?
The end of the atmosphere is not like the horizon, where you can definitely say, this is where the Earth ends and the atmosphere begins. Rather, as one travels higher and higher, the atmosphere gets thinner and thinner. One can say, for practical purposes, that the upper atmosphere begins to be indistinguishable from outer space at about 435 miles, 700 kilometers altitude, but that is really just a random place to draw the borderline. The density of the atmosphere is getting very thin indeed at an elevation of 370 miles. About 600 kilometers. At this height, there are about 6 miles, 10 kilometers. Between each molecule, this gap is known as the mean free path. The air pressure here is, effectively, 0.
What is the difference between a frost and a hard freeze?
The National Weather Service issues a hard freeze warning when it predicts that regional temperatures will fall below 27 degrees Fahrenheit minus 2.8 degrees Celsius for 4 hours or more. Such a freeze is of particular concern to gardeners and Farmers because temperatures this low will destroy crops. The good news is that a hard freeze usually spells the end. For mosquitoes and other pesky insects for the rest of the year. Frosts, on the other hand, do not require such low temperatures. In fact, air temperatures can be several degrees above freezing, while surface temperatures are at or below freezing, causing frost to form on car windows and other surfaces.
What is a London killer fog?
Despite its history of air pollution dating back centuries, Londoners seemed slow to learn from their mistakes. Air pollution from coal burning continued into the 1960s. The sulfur dioxide combined with London's famous fog, with the result being acid fog. In 1952, the thick fog became so dense that people could not see to walk or drive. Influenza, bronchitis, and pneumonia cases skyrocketed, and about 4,000 people died and another 100,000 were sickened that year from illnesses related to this killer fog.
How far is it possible to see through the atmosphere?
On a clear day that is free of haze and pollution, it is possible for people to see objects as far as 200 miles, 322 kilometers, away. At night, bright lights can be visible from as far away as 500 miles, about 800 kilometers.
Who showed that air pressure decreases as altitude increases?
French physicist and mathematician Blaise Pascal, 1623 to 1662, was inspired by fellow physicist Evangelista Torricelli, 1608 to 1647. To test the idea that the air in the atmosphere is much like seawater in an ocean. Since pressure in an ocean or lake increases as one descends into the depths, Pascal hypothesized that air pressure in a valley would be higher than on top of a mountain. To test the idea, in 1646 he asked his brother-in-law, Florent Perrier, 1605 to 1672, to use a barometer, a new invention at the time, and measure the pressure both at the top of the French volcanic peak Puy de Dôme and in the village of Clermont-Ferrand in Auvergne. The difference in elevation between the two is about 3,900 feet, 1,200 meters. Taking along witnesses to verify his readings, Perrier found that the air pressure at Clermont-Ferrand was 28 inches of mercury and at the top of Puy de Dôme it was only 24.6 inches. A monument to Pascal was later erected in Clermont-Ferrand to honor this achievement. And there is also a meteorological observatory atop Puy de Dôme.
How much water is there on Earth?
including all the world's oceans, lakes, rivers, as well as all the water contained in the Earth's soils. In the atmosphere, and in icebergs and other frozen forms. Scientists estimate that there is 3.7 x 1014 gallons, 1.4 x 1015 liters, of water on the planet.
What are some of the erratic behaviors of tornadoes?
Tornadoes are famous for their ability to destroy one home or other building while leaving the structures next door completely intact. Such random acts of destruction occur either when there is one very slim tornado or there is a multiple vortex tornado or a tornado with several satellite tornadoes surrounding it. A rope tornado, for instance, can clear a path on the ground that is only a matter of several yards wide. On the other hand, the subvortices, or suction vortices, of a multiple vortex tornado can have widely varying speeds and widths. Sometimes, too, a tornado might not quite reach the ground, but it might be low enough to rip off the roofs of multi-story structures while leaving ranch homes and strip malls unharmed. Tornadoes can exhibit other erratic behaviors, too, weakening and strengthening as they travel, or circling back on themselves to hit the same location twice. The strength of the buildings, too, matters a great deal. As the developers of the enhanced Fujita scale recognized.
What is a turtle?
In terms of meteorology, the word turtle does not refer to a shelled reptile. Rather, they are sturdy encased instruments that can be placed in the path of a tornado to measure air pressure, humidity, and temperature. Unfortunately, they cannot measure wind speeds, but they do gather this other valuable data.
Do we have any evidence of global warming in the past?
Yes, there is a great deal of evidence for global warming events in the past. The following lists two of the more well-known ones: mid-Cretaceous period. During this period, between about 120 and 90 million years ago, new ocean crust was produced at about twice the normal rate. Large volcanic plateaus were forming in the ocean basins, ocean temperatures were very high, and there was a peak in worldwide petroleum formation. Just as startling was the sea level, which was about 330 to 660 feet. 100 to 200 meters, higher than at present. The reasons for the high temperatures were probably numerous, including the release of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, by volcanic eruptions, creating a supergreenhouse effect. This led to temperatures about 20 to 22 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, above our current average global temperatures. Interestingly enough, it is thought that the large volume of basalts that erupted on the ocean floor displaced a great deal of ocean water, causing sea levels to rise. And with the rise in sea level and temperatures, organisms flourished, eventually providing material necessary for petroleum formation. Eocene period. During this time, between about 55 to 38 million years ago, temperatures also increased, with tropical vegetation reaching about 45 to 55 degrees north and south of the equator, or about 15 degrees higher than today. Based on rock samples, it appears that the Earth had between 2 and 6 times the amount of carbon dioxide we have today. Scientists believe this global warming was caused by continental collisions, events that released large amounts of this greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. This also shows how the rock cycle and tectonic processes can affect atmospheric conditions.
What is the National Acid Precipitation Assessment Program, NAPAP?
Initiated by the Acid Precipitation Act of 1980. The NAPAP studied acid deposition throughout the United States. After 10 years, the researchers reported to Congress that while acid rain was a problem, the danger was not quite as severe as initially feared. About 4% of the lakes in the United States were deemed unacceptably acidic, and 25% of these lakes had acidic water due to natural causes. For example, decaying vegetation debris can raise water acidity levels.
Which country produces the most greenhouse gas?
This dubious honor used to belong to the United States. The economic boom in China, however, has led to a corresponding surge in pollution. While, per capita, Americans still cause more pollution. There are 4 times as many Chinese as Americans. A 2007 study published by the Netherlands Environmental Agency noted that Americans produce about 20 tons, 18 metric tons, of carbon dioxide emissions per capita, versus 5 tons for each Chinese citizen and about 10 tons, 9 metric tons, for each European. Industrialized nations emitted about 16.1 tons, 14.6 metric tons, of greenhouse gases per capita versus about 4.2 tons, 3.8 metric tons, per capita for those living in developing countries. The study also noted that if the increase in greenhouse gases is not halted within 10 to 25 years, the planet will experience a runaway greenhouse effect with average temperatures rising several degrees Celsius, causing ice caps to melt and coastal regions worldwide to become flooded.
Where can I find reliable climate statistics online?
There are many websites about the weather available on the internet, some are better than others. You can get lots of information from government websites, such as the National Weather Service at http://weather.gov and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration at http://www.noaa.gov. There are also some online databases available. World Climate at http://www.worldclimate.com is a searchable online database that includes more than 85,000 climate statistics from all over the world. By typing in the name of a city, you can obtain data concerning rainfall and temperature. Weatherbase at http://www.weatherbase.com has information on nearly 16,500 cities around the world. It even lets you pick whether you want to see statistics in metric or US units.
What is a concentric eye wall?
Most hurricanes are centered around one eye, but sometimes a secondary eye wall surrounds this eye. The second eye wall surrounds the first, and is thus called a concentric eye wall.
Who first discovered sunspots?
The earliest recorded observations of sunspots go all the way back to the year 28 BCE, when Chinese astronomers made note of dark spots on the sun. In the era of modern, Western civilization, the credit goes to the famous Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642. Who first recognized sunspot activity through his telescope in around 1611, sources vary, crediting the discovering anywhere between 1610 and 1613. Records show that others, including Johannes Kepler, 1571 to 1630, had observed sunspots before Galileo, but they failed to recognize them for what they were. Kepler, for instance, mistook the spot he saw several years before Galileo, as the planet Mercury orbiting in front of the Sun.
Where do meteors and meteorites come from?
Most meteors, especially those that fall during meteor showers, are the tiny remnants of comets left in Earth's orbital path over many, many years. Most meteorites, which are generally larger than meteors, are pieces of asteroids and comets that somehow came apart from their parent bodies, perhaps from a collision with another body and orbited in the solar system until they collided with Earth.
What is the most dangerous U.S. state to live in due to tornadoes?
Massachusetts, because of its population density, has actually seen more deaths and severe injuries from tornadoes than any other U.S. state. However, it is still far riskier to live in Oklahoma, which gets hit by more tornadoes than any other state.
What are ocean currents?
The oceans don't remain still, their water is constantly moving in giant circles known as currents. In the northern hemisphere, surface currents move clockwise, while in the southern hemisphere they move counterclockwise. Currents help to moderate temperatures on land in places like the British Isles, which are farther north than the U.S. Canadian border, by sending warm water from the Caribbean northeast across the Atlantic Ocean to northern Europe. A current known as the Antarctic Circumpolar Current circles the southern continent. The North Atlantic and North Pacific Oceans each have a large clockwise current, while the South Atlantic and South Pacific Oceans each have a large counterclockwise current.
What are the fastest currents in the world's oceans?
The fastest known current is part of the Gulf Stream system. It heads north from the southern tip of Florida toward Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, flowing up to 3.3 to 6.6 feet. 1 to 2 meters per second, with some estimates as high as 7.5 feet, 2.3 meters per second. The Kuroshio current in the Pacific Ocean runs a close second in terms of speed, around 1.3 to 4 feet, 0.4 to 1.2 meters per second.
What is the Milankovic cycle?
Earth's orbit is currently fairly circular around the Sun. However, this is not always the case. Our planet experiences shifts from the current circular orbit to a much more elliptical one, during which the difference between perihelion and aphelion is very marked. The entire cycle from circular to elliptical and back again takes about 95,000 years to complete. During the periods when the Earth is in its more elliptical orbit and ventures farther from the Sun, ice ages tend to occur. The theory was first formulated by Serbian geophysicist Milutin Milankovic, also spelled Milankovic, 1879 to 1958, who was well known for his research into ice ages. His theories were later verified, in 1976, through the study of sediment cores taken during deep-sea explorations.
What is convergence?
Convergence occurs when air masses approach each other from different directions. As the masses collide, air pressure between them goes up, which causes air to flow upwards.
How much carbon monoxide is produced in the United States by cars?
As of 2002, automobile traffic in the United States was producing 346 tons. 314 metric tons of carbon monoxide per day.
Why do clouds float?
Cloud droplets are, actually, subject to the Earth's gravity, and so they do, in fact, fall. They do so very slowly, however, and are subject to winds and air pressure that keep them aloft. When not being blown about, cloud droplets descend at a rate of about 30 feet per hour.
What is a certified consulting meteorologist, CCM?
The American Meteorological Society, AMS, grants the title of CCM to professional meteorologists who have both broad experience in meteorology and a highly specialized knowledge of particular fields on which they intend to consult. In addition to education and experience, a meteorologist has to demonstrate professional conduct and service to be named a CCM. They are sought out by law firms, governments, law enforcement agencies, insurance companies, and other private businesses for their expertise and for the assurance that all CCMs will provide reliable and authoritative information. Only about 5% of AMS members are CCMs. The AMS provides a listing of CCMs by specialty on its website at http://www.amtsoc.org.
What is the coldest city in America's lower 48 states?
Butte, Montana, holds the honor of being the coldest city in the contiguous 48 states. The temperature in Butte falls below the freezing point 223 days each year, on average.
What are the Van Allen belts?
The Van Allen belts are two rings of electrically charged particles that encircle our planet. The belts are shaped like fat donuts, widest above Earth's equator and curving downward toward Earth's surface near the polar regions. These charged particles usually come toward Earth from outer space, often from the Sun, and are trapped within these two regions of Earth's magnetosphere. Since the particles are charged, they spiral around and along the magnetosphere's magnetic field lines. The lines lead away from Earth's equator, and the particles shuffle back and forth between the two magnetic poles. The closer belt is about 2,000 miles, 3,000 kilometers, from Earth's surface, and the farther belt is about 10,000 miles, 15,000 kilometers, away.
How often do ocean tides occur on Earth?
During a 26-hour period, each point on Earth's surface moves through a series of 2 high tides and 2 low tides, first high, then low, then high again, then low again. The length of the cycle is the sum of Earth's period of rotation, or the length of its day. 24 hours, and the Moon's eastward orbital movement around Earth, 2 hours.
What are some of the coldest temperatures measured in Florida?
The Sunshine State is not a complete stranger to wintry weather. For example, 5 inches, 13 centimeters, of snow fell near what is now Jacksonville on January 11, 1800, and on February 13, 1899, the state had snowfall as far south as Ft. Myers. 4 inches. About 10 centimeters, of snow descended on Milton, Florida, on March 6, 1954. The farthest south that snow has been seen in Florida is in the city of Homestead, south of Miami, in January of 1977. There have been incidents of light snow flurries, sleet, and hail over the centuries, including recent snow flurries in the Panhandle area on February 3, 2007, and flurries in Daytona Beach on January 3, 2008.
Which is more deadly, tornadoes or lightning?
More people in the United States die from being struck by lightning than from a tornado. About 80 people die annually from tornadoes, while more than 100 perish after a lightning stroke, on average.
What city in the United States holds the record for a dry spell?
From October 3, 1912, to November 8, 1914, a period of 767 days no rain fell on Baghdad, California.
How many people are killed in the United States by lightning?
The U.S. total from 1959 to 2003 is 3,696 deaths. About 60 people die each year from lightning, about 300 are injured annually. The highest death rates are in Florida, 425 killed between 1959 and 2003. Making it the most dangerous state to live in when it comes to lightning injuries. Below is a state-by-state listing using the most recent data from NOAA.